We have to remember, like, the internet is forever, right? If I go back to, my daughter's not a teenager anymore, but when she was a teenager, like social media, I'm like, you have to be aware that anything you put out there will live forever and people will find it. And now with AI, like if you think about like hunting for these sorts of information, like you're looking into the background of a person you're thinking about hiring or whatnot, and maybe those things that you did before that you're maybe a little bit embarrassed of, you thought you got rid of, you didn't, because the internet is forever, can be more easily found.
Exactly. It's basically anyone can hire a team of private investigators to go find stuff now.
For cheap.
It's kind of what it feels like. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And for really, really cheap.
Exactly.
Comparatively.
Comparatively, at the very least, for sure. This is Compiler, an original podcast from Red Hat. I'm your host, Emily Bach, a senior product manager at Red Hat.
And I'm Vincent Danon, Red Hat's vice president of product security.
On this show, we go beyond the buzzwords and jargon and simplify tech topics.
And in this episode, we take a look at the intersection between AI and data security.
In our last episode, we talked about data as a target, why it's valuable, what can be done with it, and how to protect it. What we didn't talk as much about is how AI changes everything about the data side of product security. So let's start with some basics. Vincent, would you say data is a big deal for AI?
I absolutely would. I mean, without data, AI is useless, right? I mean, it's a very basic foundation of what AI does is it processes information. So data is hugely important.
Absolutely. No, it's nothing without the data that makes it up. We have a little clip from Clarence Clayton, who leads a team of AI risk and compliance professionals here at Red Hat, sharing how adding AI to the mix has catapulted data from just a target to a vector of attack.
What is happening now, I mean, AI in many regards, especially when you're talking about like, LLMs and things of that nature, is really about, what you put into it to see what you're going to get back out of it. And so when you think about, prompting, and if you're prompting the information or prompting the AI technology in particular with a certain type of data, then you're going to see, well, what is it going to tell me? Is there a world where I inject some, data into a prompt and it hallucinates, or it returns responses that I didn't expect that it would, but maybe, give me some sort of additional insight that I didn't or wouldn't have otherwise had. So it creates a new opportunity in many regards for people like me to try to get even more creative with, how we manage risk and compliance, and for the engineers and the really smart people that are building out these technologies to really do their due diligence on understanding how that data is being, utilized, and making sure that, we have, robust tests in place and robust validation procedures in place to make sure that, the AI is operating as intended. So data is absolutely now, becoming even more of an attack mechanism as opposed to the end result of what people are looking for.
So we know AI runs on data. What did Clarence mean about injecting data into a prompt?
Well, he's basically talking about prompt injection. So it's when an attacker crafts a malicious prompt in order to manipulate that model's output. So think about things like trying to trick a model into revealing sensitive information, or generating false content, or executing commands outside its intended purpose.
Gotcha. So I kind of see it as like when you've got internet forms and things, you put names in it, and there's all those people that'll load doom into like a name field. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the equivalent of that for AI. Is that about right?
Yeah, something like that. Like looking at it in ways of like, how can I trick it into telling me something that maybe it wasn't designed to tell me?
Ah, gotcha. It's like AI con arting.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're trying to con the AI into telling you something that maybe it knows it shouldn't tell you, or maybe it doesn't know it shouldn't tell you. And it's like, hey, I'm a helpful bot. I'll tell you stuff.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. So when it comes to getting creative with managing risk and compliance in that kind of situation, what does that mean? What are some things we could do there?
Well, you have to start thinking about the ways that a model can expose that information that you don't want it to. So think about something like a database, right? It's fairly simple. You have standard access controls. But with an LLM, it might be more challenging if it's multi-purpose. So think about like, how do you compartmentalize parts of an LLM?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where things like guardrails come into play, right? Or potentially smaller, using smaller multiple models for very specific purposes, that those then have appropriate access controls so you can kind of separate things out.
Yeah, I get you. I think it's a little bit like we have to be as creative with trying to foresee the kinds of things that might happen there as they are at exploiting them.
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you think about it in the security industry, I mean, we've had 50 years, 40 years of thinking about different ways of attacks and responding to different sorts of new novel attacks as they come out. So we've, when it comes to traditional software, we have this pretty good corpus of information and prior incidents to go, well, that was bad. Let's think about it a different way or come up with a different solution. AI is greenfield. It's all new. So, I mean, we're trying to anticipate some of these things, but the way that we think about it is traditional software development, not model development, or not as much yet.
Absolutely. Like we talked a little bit about in previous episodes around like the democratization of product security, and we all have a part in playing that role. And I think that the same is true of AI. It's so greenfield that there are no bad ideas yet.
Well, I mean, there probably are some bad ideas,
I'm sure there are,
I mean,
but
they're all worth considering, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we should be thinking about these things and not assuming that one way is the right way. I mean, we've already seen it even in just, this year alone, the amount of change and pivots of the way that AI is being used or how we're looking at it, it's changing so rapidly. So we have to hold on to our ideas loosely. We can't hold on to them tightly.
Absolutely. So going back to Clarence, what does hearing data as an attack mechanism make you feel?
Well, I mean, I agree with Clarence in a lot of things, but I also think about it a little bit differently. I don't think it's so much that data is like the attack mechanism. Mm-hmm. I think it's more that data can be attacked in, like we were talking about, new and novel ways that maybe we hadn't thought about before the advent of LLMs. So we have to look at these things entirely differently now.
Exactly. Like it's not only a target, but it's also in some ways like a vulnerability in and of itself.
It is. And it's very different. I mean, you can think about like prompt injection, like SQL injection, but just a lot more creative, right? Like we understand SQL injection.
Yeah.
Right. Eventually we'll get to the point where we understand prompt injection, but we're talking about data and a black box that thinks on its own that will, hallucinate. It will lie, like we heard before, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's all those pieces that you have to consider that we don't think about with traditional software that just does what it tells you to do, and it either does it right or it does it wrong. It doesn't do it somewhere in between.
Yeah. It's always been like it will do it or it will not, and now it will do it enthusiastically.
And in a completely random way that you didn't expect.
Exactly. A lot less predictable, for sure. Mm-hmm. And I like what you said there about, AI is designed to be helpful most of the time. There's a really real danger of having it reveal more than it should.
A lot of information about people is publicly available online, right? So say, for example, you just went and did a Google search about me. I don't know. And then you did say, hey, AI, what can you tell me about, Clarence Clayton that, works at Red Hat? And depending on what sources the AI has, access to, maybe there's information, about projects that I've worked on here at the company that are still yet to be released. And it's like, hey, the littlest, piece of publicly available information has now, led to, some sort of exploitation or some sort of, inadvertent or unauthorized disclosure of information that, I or someone that I'm affiliated with might not have wanted people to know, at least not yet.
Yeah, those additional insights that AI is really good at providing that in a lot of ways, they can also be a security risk. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that somebody needs to talk to Clarence and tell him not to talk about not yet released projects publicly. But because that was his premise. Sorry, Clarence. But I mean, that was the premise, right? Like, I think fundamentally what we're looking at is especially for these public models, right? Mm-hmm. They're looking at public information. They don't have access to your corporate private information or your personal information. Somebody has to feed it to them. Mm-hmm. And that's publicly based, right? And I don't know if, AI provides more, right? It can only tell you things that it knows about, but it can tell you them faster.
Yeah.
Right. And I think for me, that's the danger. So think about like AI search, which is starting to increasingly displace traditional search. So if I Google something, I get a list of resources that might be relevant, but it's up to me to read it and then hope that I find what I'm looking for. Now, with AI, it can perform that same search, it can consume the data, and it can analyze it, and then give me back those contextual answers to questions I was asking it significantly faster than I could if I were manually searching for it and doing all of this reading myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think it's always been a risk putting things out publicly that shouldn't be. Like, nothing necessarily has changed there, except it's harder to hide stuff in the noise. So if you put it out at all, it's a little bit more dangerous just because it's easier to find because AI is so good at finding things.
Yeah, and we have to remember, like, the internet is forever.
Yeah.
Right. If I go back to, my daughter's not a teenager anymore, but when she was a teenager and like social media, I'm like, you have to be aware that anything you put out there will live forever and people will find it.
Yes.
And now with AI, like if you think about like, like hunting for these sorts of information, like you're looking into the background of a person you're thinking about hiring or whatnot. And maybe those things that you did before that you're maybe a little bit embarrassed of, you thought you got rid of, you didn't, because the internet is forever, can be more easily found.
Exactly. It's basically anyone can hire a team of private investigators to go find stuff now.
For cheap.
It's kind of what it feels like. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And for really, really cheap.
Exactly.
Comparatively.
Comparatively, at the very least, for sure. What about de-anonymization of data? Does AI pose a significant risk there?
Maybe. It could certainly draw connections faster than a human could. Mm-hmm. And I think that the challenge here is that it might not be right.
Yeah.
So if you make decisions based on that data, so I don't know, for example, if you were trying to find your long lost brother, mm-hmm. you might end up reaching out to the wrong person, but be convinced that it was the right one because all this information that the AI provided you. Right. So yeah. I think in that way, like for de-anonymizing, maybe.
Yeah.
Just because it can draw connections faster.
I could see that. And I also see it being kind of risky on both ends. Like it's risky to try and make connections that way because it can be wrong and confidently so. But it's also risky if there is a connection out there between one piece of data and another. Like there's the example of expired credit cards. If mm-hmm. you can tie your name to financial information, might be able to find something like that easier. So yes, risk, but also risk if you're trying to use it for evil.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, there's that nobody puts out information. Like I certainly don't put my name and credit card in public places expecting people to find it. So right. Like what the data that's being fed into the AI it still matters. Mm-hmm. Right. And this means data protection becomes more important. So if you're thinking about like those overall security risks, making sure that data doesn't leak in a place where the AI, we'll call it the AI, can find it and consume it and regurgitate it, probably a good idea.
Absolutely. So AI obviously is changing things. It's making it easier to go through reams of data and undo some of the protections we have in place, some of that hiding in the noise kind of stuff. But that's not the end of the story. How else can the bad guys, TM, use AI models to their advantage?
So if I'm interacting with AI technology that's meant to provide information about a knowledge base, and then I go in and say, here are my configuration settings. Here's this crown jewel, coding base that, is going to, be solve the next problem, for our company. Can you critique that? It's like, that is not at all what this system was meant to consume. But you've now injected, some information into an AI, system that could be, sensitive in nature. And now you're entrusting the owner, the producer of that technology to, not, use it for any other purpose, to maybe just delete it or like just, send that to trash like that. I can't do anything with that. And you're also hoping that that environment doesn't somehow get exploited and say, oh, let me pull all the logs of the things that, people have, done to interact with this system lately. It's like, oh, wow, look at this interesting code base that somebody had, injected in there, perhaps unnecessarily. So the more that you can be prescriptive about this is what the system, is meant to do, tell me, what the issue is. And then one of two things will happen. You interact with and say, I'm not designed to answer a question like that, and I deleted your information. Or, sure, tell me more. So it's almost like walking them through step by step how to make sure that, they're interacting with the system in the way that we intend to get them the outcome, that they want.
Now, that's a big topic because data is so important for AI, but it's not just the data it's trained on, it's the data you give it when you're interacting with it too. Mm-hmm. Is there a way to tell if the data you're injecting into a prompt gets deleted or stays isolated?
You really need to understand that the way a model might use the data that you provide it. All right, so if it's just using the information you provide in a prompt, say to train itself, then you've just added to that corpus of data. Not all LLMs do that. I will make a statement. I mean, this is true for social media and many other things. If you're not paying for that service, you are the product.
Exactly.
Right. So, keep that thing in mind. But a lot of these models have very specific ways of training, or these model makers have very specific ways of training these models. And I'm pretty sure that they don't want it polluted with random noise that, the end users are providing it. And so that the model maker has better control of its data. The one thing that Clarence did note there that I think is really, really important to know, that even if you're not using that data to train the model, that information is being kept there, mm-hmm. right? Or potentially collected there to see how people interact with that model.
Yeah.
Right. So the model maker might see what that intended use is. And they might decide, based on a lot of people asking for cookie recipes, they might be like, oh, we need to train it on more cookie recipes because that seems to be what people are interested in. So they're using that data for something. It might not be in the model, but now it's like not just trusting the model itself, it's trusting that model maker as well.
Yeah, I kind of see it like one-way glass almost. Like interacting with an AI feels like a really personal conversation that's, happening in an isolated space, but you don't necessarily know who's behind the window. And from a security aspect, I assume it's best to always assume that there's someone there.
And you know what? When you say that, it made me think about something I read a few weeks ago, that one of the most popular uses for these AI chatbots right now mm-hmm. is as a therapist.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah. And so you just think about, what are people telling these things to get their quote unquote therapy from? Like, that feels like a lot of very personal information that you're providing to it that some guy might be reading as they're going through, like, oh, what was prompted today? And they're learning all these things about you. And whether they can tie it to you as a person or not, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But that information is there and somebody has access to it in the same way. I think we talked about before, video cameras and people watching feeds from in your house while they're eating lunch because they're bored.
Yeah, exactly. No, and that's kind of how I try to think about it, because it's in that kind of chat world, it feels private, but not only might they have access to your data, there's also the question of selling that data after the fact to someone else.
Yes.
Trust is important when you're using an LLM as well, I would say.
I agree.
So is there a world then where that injected data can infect the AI model as a whole?
Probably. If there is a world, probably. But again, it depends on the model maker and whether they're using those prompts from users to train that data or not. And personally, I think that's a terrible idea. Yeah. You go from a curated, known good, I'll say good in quotes, set of data to like the Wild West of whatever crazy things people are prompting AI bots with. I don't think that's good value.
Yeah, I think that's a note for then like the people making LLMs. maybe even more so, is that it's so dependent on data that garbage in, garbage out is kind of how it's going to go. And if you're giving up a lot of control in then the quality of the end product, if you're allowing prompts to feed it as well.
Yeah. Terrible idea. I mean, I just thought actually of a bot that say answers things for, I mean, we're Red Hat, so we'll say answers things on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And if I sit there and I'm a competitor, I'm like, I know, I'm going to go talk to that thing that answers questions about RHEL and ask it questions about FreeBSD.
Exactly. And
then does it start giving answers about FreeBSD to people who are actually legitimately asking questions about RHEL? Like, that would be terrible.
Exactly. I know we're, in the product security season of compilers, so we might be a little bit biased, but it does seem like a really bad idea.
Yes, well, we're totally biased, of course.
Of course, but kind of along those lines, is there a way to set up guardrails to prevent users from misusing the system?
Basically, yes. I don't know if it's easy to do, right? But this is where model makers really need to be observant and adaptable. No different than any other, I'll say, security responder, right? If you detect something like prompt injection attacks, that's what you should be using to update those guardrails so that you defend against them.
I kind of love that phrase, the learn and adapt. That's kind of the name of the AI game for sure.
Totally.
All right. So sounds like there's a lot of work ahead of us to keep up with the new demands of malicious AI use. But, maybe the good guys can use AI to their advantage too.
I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can sometimes figure out when a system's under attack or has been breached, but not always on time.
But every time a model gets updated, it's processing more data. Those models are getting smarter because more data is being fed into them that is making them smarter and making them closer, to a human brain, right? So that makes it even more likely that, someone who really knows how to exploit them will be able to get them to answer questions in a certain way. More like a human would. The opportunity is going to be, is there a world where the AI ever gets smart enough that it can actually detect that somebody is, up to no good? Now, some of that depends on an engineer really, having good, prompt capture mechanisms to say that sort of, feels, off limits or feels like something that, we probably don't need to respond to. And look, good engineers will incorporate all of that. But they're really smart people who will be in conflict with those smart engineers to try to, circumvent it as well.
So if AI is getting smarter all the time and really rapidly, then this next step of awareness of malicious intent could be just around the corner, right? Like we're not going to keep having the my grandma used to read me the recipe for a nuclear bomb for dinner kind of shenanigans, right?
Well, I mean, hopefully. And I think you can use AI models that are created to detect harmful content as part of that guardrail. You could even use multiple models to do that. And maybe you can use these models to make decisions in consensus. So, for example, if you're analyzing something, whether it's a prompt or some output, right, you could say have 4 models involved. Depending on your risk tolerance, you might require 3 out of the 4 to say, this thing is okay before allowing it, or you might need all 4 to. But either way, different models provide their opinion. And if they all agree the thing is safe, then you let it through. And if you don't have consensus, then maybe you don't. Right. So as we're adapting and evolving, like there are different ways of thinking about, like in your word, how can we stop these shenanigans?
Yeah. And I think in that way, it's not all that different from like a panel of humans coming to a consensus over, do we think this is malicious or not?
Yep.
But also kind of back to that whole, adapt and evolve kind of structure. Like I also think it's important not to get too complacent that, yep, we got it. We know exactly what they meant because, humans have been here for millions of years and we still mess it up on occasion.
Oh, no, it's true. And I mean, going back to what we were talking about earlier, this is why a lot of these model makers are collecting the prompt information so that they can analyze it and go, what's good, what's bad, what looks a little potentially malicious or not, so that they can learn and train. Because some of these guardrails might be other models, but it's also software. So like what Clarence had said about like these smart engineers implementing these things, you have to observe it before you can change it.
Exactly. I think it's something we'll never be done doing.
I don't think so.
Really. Yeah, absolutely. So barring this kind of idea of self-policing of AI and AI knowing intent from a prompt, what kind of other safeguards can teams put in place to hamper the efforts of those bad guys, TM?
Yeah. Well, I think, this notion of models on-prem tuned for a specific purpose with appropriate access controls is probably going to be the way forward. So there's been a lot of talk about like these small language models.
Yeah.
Right. So you take a small language model trained on customer data or trained on internal IP, but it's only accessible to those who are in customer support or engineering. Right. Then not only do you have those guardrails in place, but you also have models that are fit for purpose. And only those who need access to that data can actually access the model. You don't expose it to the entire company, and you certainly don't expose it to the entire globe.
Right. Not all that unlike, you're not going to share out an open public Google Doc of information and expect people not to edit it. You want to finish it and then publish the result.
Assuming that you want the public to know it.
Also true. Also very true.
Right? If that's internal information, you make sure that that Google Doc or whatever is locked down so that only the people who need to know are the people who get to see.
Exactly. I think that resonates really well with some of the other product security topics we've talked about already. Like, it's not that different in a lot of ways from what things we've done before. There's always been new threats, and there's always been ways to try to counteract them. And we have got some pretty good strategies for coming up with new things. And it's just keeping in mind the AI dimension of it on top.
Yeah, I mean, the fundamentals are the same. It's the tactical approach to solve the problem that may be different.
Exactly. The core truths still hold. Don't want people to have stuff they shouldn't have, so you should make sure they can't.
Correct.
Really boiling it down there.
Yes, good job, Emily.
There we go. Simplifying tech topics, that's what we do. So I think we covered a lot today. I want to kind of summarize some of those main points and then get your last thoughts before we wrap up here. So number one, we know data is at the core of AI. That can also make data a vector for corrupting AI models. Number two, AI can be used to glean insights from mountains of data and can reveal information that should otherwise be secret. And three, we're going to need to use AI to defend against AI attacks.
Yeah, that last one I think is the most important, right? Like, people shouldn't be scared of AI because it can do some naughty things. There are benefits to AI that we shouldn't overlook because, I mean, guess what? If we're, and I mean, I'll use these terms loosely. If we're the good guys and we're not using AI, and the bad guys have no scruples at all and they are using it to their advantage, then we're the ones at the disadvantage. So we have to use it responsibly, and figure out ways. I think you had mentioned earlier about like the speed of detecting attacks, right? An AI is going to detect those things much faster than a human is. So why wouldn't we use something like that?
Exactly. AI, when it comes down to it, is a tool, and it doesn't have a morality of its own. It depends on how you use it. So we can use it to defend ourselves against people who would attack with it as well.
Right.
And we shouldn't be too afraid of that. It comes down to education, I think.
Totally. And just accepting the responsibility.
Exactly. And that, democratization, I think we all have a part to play in that too. It's not just leaving it to the teams that do AI. We need those creative ideas from everywhere that we can get. Since it's so new, we might be coming up with some ideas we wouldn't otherwise have.
Just maybe in closing there, if you think about like what you just said, you don't look for software engineers to solve social engineering attacks. And we're basically looking at this as social engineering of AI in a lot of ways, right? Software engineers can help implement those defenses, but are they the ones who are going to be able to detect the linguistics, I'll say, of what that social engineering looks like? I don't know.
Absolutely. I think you nailed it. So now you've heard our thoughts. Now it's time to add yours to the conversation. Hit us up on social media at Red Hat and use the hashtag #CompilerPodcast. And I think that'll do it for this episode of Compiler.
And this episode is written by Johan Philippine, and a big thank you again to our guest, Clarence Clayton.
Compiler is produced by the team at Red Hat with technical support from Dialect.
And if you like today's episode, don't keep it to yourself. Follow the show, rate the show, leave a review, or share it with somebody else that you know might take advantage of it.
And we'll see you next time.